Mach 3, give me crew show on 2, 3, and 4.
Line 1, actually 1.
6, 3. Mach 3, give me start line 2.
5 electric. Mach 3. Line 2, Mach 9.
Mach 3, give me start line 1 and crew show on 7 and 9.
Line 1, crew show 7 and 9, Mach 9.
Yeah, do something. I hate weapons.
Super Op, line 3, reservoir, avionics.
Super Ops. Line 4 is code 3 for engine vibe.
Fuck. Hey, so I started a Patreon because frankly this stuff's getting expensive. Nothing will change the podcast or the blog if you don't subscribe, but if you want early access to episodes, monthly AMAs, episode shoutouts, voting on podcast topics, and all kinds of 20 Years Done gear, head over to patreon.com/20yearsdone. This month's top tier Patreon shoutout goes to Kevin Traw, Robbie Walker, Travis Barnes, JT Owens, and Delinda Baker. Thanks for the support. Okay, so today I'm joined by Branden Cate, and he's a currently serving active duty first sergeant in the United States Air Force, and we're going to talk about what it's like to be a first sergeant, what a day in the life type of thing is, where he spends a lot of his time, a lot of his focus, what he wish he could do better, what he is proud of that he does well, and just kind of the dynamics and relationship of the job. So, Branden, if you want, go ahead and do a disclaimer and then give your kind of experience and background.
I appreciate that, Chris. Yeah. My name is Branden Cate. I'll just go ahead and get the disclaimer out up front. That way we can both kind of settle in and get more comfortable and talking about things. Just to be clear, that the views I express here are strictly my own, are in no way a reflection or a representation of the United States Air Force or the Department of Defense. So I'm originally from East Tennessee. I'm an F-16 crew chief by trade. Been in a little over 19 and a half years now. And F-16s is all I've ever known. Not for lack of trying. God knows I tried to go to A-10s and 15s just to experience things differently. But 16s is kind of where you get roped into. Spent plenty of time at Shaw Air Force Base, Korea 2.5 times, the halftime in the TSP. Plenty of other experiences, TDYs, all that kind of fun stuff. Now currently serving as a first sergeant. Took me 3 years to get the job through DSD, and then finally got picked up through the volunteer process. So I appreciate you having me on. Looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, and how long have you been a shirt?
I've been a shirt now. I officially got the diamond back in October of 2020. Prior to that, I had the opportunity to serve in the EMS squadron at Shaw as a full-time assistant first sergeant for right at 7 months. And then the command chief asked me to step up to CPTS wing staff and contracting to fill that void as their acting shirt for another 7 to 8 months before I went to Korea again. So I'm just really dusting things off that I had about 2 to 2.5 years ago. It's different when you've got the diamond, but back then I got a little taste of the world, had all the privileges of the diamond, just didn't get that sweet STAP.
Yeah, and also I want to give a special thanks to your local public affairs. I've asked a few other active duty people to come on the podcast, and kind of what they've been told either formally or informally by their chain of command and or their public affairs is just not a good idea. And I was really surprised at your public affairs. Like as long as you stay up front, it's the views of you and not the United States Air Force. Yeah, go in there and talk about it. And I think it's good because I think a lot of people might misconstrue what I do as somehow I'm negative or something. It's like my intent is just to make things better. And part of what you do to make things better is you point out the shit that's wrong.
Exactly.
I appreciate the trust. They probably had more in you than me because I'm a bit of a nobody, but I think that shows. I think that was the right call, and I was really happy to hear that. So special thanks to them, and obviously your chain of kind of blessing it as well. So that's a big deal, and I want to make sure they understand that it's appreciated. So I guess let's start with, what do you spend a lot of your time doing as a shirt that you may not have realized you were going to spend a lot of time doing as a shirt?
I mean, you don't think you're going to be deep diving into PME. You don't really think you're going to be deep diving into IMR, your medical readiness, things like that. But those are big eats throughout the day, especially where I work now in the medical group. There's a heightened emphasis that medics are medically ready. Mm-hmm. So that there's a heightened sense of awareness there. PME, whether it's ALS, NCOA, senior NCOA, trying to get with the targeted folks, but also posturing your eligible folks. And it's a constant back and forth. I'm lucky where I work right now that There aren't a lot of disciplinary problems, and I may be jinxing myself there a lot, so let me knock on this desk real quick. Things are stable. I won't use the keyword, they're stable. So I'm able to wander around a lot and really try to get to know my people a lot better, which is, with your maintenance background, as well as I do that even as a section chief and a flight chief, as much as you try, especially this time of year, December, January, it's damn near an impossibility. When you're writing 1206s and EPRs and all the other shit that you're responsible for, it's hard as a section chief and a flight chief to carve out that time. So that's my day is more spent now getting the opportunity to walk around, to talk to people, to meet people, which is what I love to do and why I got into the job in the first place.
So also, how different is it going from an F-16 crew chief to, you said you were doing acting shirt at contracting and now you're working at a medical squadron? I mean, it kind of harkens back to my Nonner episode I did where I kind of talked about, how maintenance perceives people that are outside maintenance. But I imagine the morale concerns between the flight line and the medical squadron, those are radically different, sort of like figuring out morale or what drives morale for those two things are going to be really, really different beasts, right?
Absolutely. It's a different culture. It is. And something I'm sharing with them, and it's something I've learned since I got in the seat over there, is when you really pull away the bullshit and you really peel back the layers, they suffer the same problems that we do. There's too much to do. There's not enough people to do it. And there's not enough hours in the day to get it all done. There just isn't. So they suffer from that same kind of conundrum, the same dilemma. The crew is different. I will say that they're not quite as morose. They tend to be just a little bit happier. And maybe that's just on the surface when I'm around, man. I think that, they can trust me and that they're upfront with me and how they're feeling is actually what they're expressing to me. But of course, you never really know until somebody comes forward and says this place freaking sucks or this is a shithole or whatever it may be, however they choose to word it. But the culture is different. You're just, again, reading people doesn't really change because, from the ramp, you can tell the guys that are burned out. They're tuned up, they're burned out, they've had enough. And you get the same kind of indicators over in medical, you really do.
And that kind of harkens back to another conversation I had where it was just talking about how do you get the pulse of morale? How do you determine, obviously you're talking about just seeing if people are burned out, but what type of data points do you pull from to figure out the general health of the enlisted force for your squadron?
One of the things I like to do, and at least it's something my mentor taught me, it was the shirt that I worked for when I was in a maintenance squadron there at Shaw. Something he taught me was you're not so much paying attention to what the flight chief is saying. You're not so much paying attention to what the senior NCOs and the tech sergeants are saying. I'm looking at the word choice. I'm looking at the nonverbals that I'm getting from the staff sergeants, that I'm getting from the senior airmen, that I'm getting from the A-wings. I mean, you've heard the typical response, how's your day going? Oh, man, I'm living the dream. I know what that means. You know what that means, too.
Yeah.
So, I'm looking for that kind of stuff. And it's something, I make sure I try to circle back around with. If I run into them as we're walking through the halls of the hospital or whatever it might be, just, hey, man, you good? Is there something on your mind? Is there something you want to tell me that maybe you don't say in the group? But it's, in this job especially, something I'm discovering is the constant follow-up. You have to follow up. It's not enough to be like, hey, y'all are good, right? Like, y'all are good. Cool. And then just walking away and leaving it. It's watching for those nonverbals, watching for those indicators and word choice, and circling back to those folks.
So I'm probably getting ahead of myself here, too. I think we should probably define what a first sergeant should be doing or what it is. So I'm going to kind of give my take on it, and then you give your take, and we can probably fill in the blanks between the two of us and give like a complete answer of what a shirt is. So, the traditional is they're the enlisted advisor to the commander. So they're there to let the commander know what the status of the enlisted members of that unit are, the morale, the discipline, the pulse of the enlisted force. They're also there as just a general advisor to the commander, a sounding board when they're making decisions, if it in any way, shape, or form could involve the enlisted force, which, unless you're in a very peculiar squadron, you're going to have most of your commander's decisions are going to involve the enlisted force, unless it's some super duper op squadron. The shirt is also going to be, I always thought as like the primary squadron level disciplinarian. That's the first stop when it comes to discipline. And typically it's the more personal sort of discipline and or punishment, but it's also typically the more preferred in my experience. Like I'd rather get in trouble with the shirt than the commander type of deal, just because of the scope of authority. But it's a little bit more personal because it's like, that's the person that you really care about what they think of you. And then a shirt has to really build, in order to really function well, the shirt has to build trust with the commander. and the shirt has to build trust with the enlisted force. And sometimes that can be a competition. Those can sometimes be diametrically opposed if it's in a particular type of unit that isn't necessarily healthy, where the commander and the health and safety enlisted force might be at odds with each other. And then it's just going to be, facilitating a lot of administrative things that are not necessarily contained within specific sections or offices in the squadron. The shirt's kind of like the vacuum for everything else that needs to be done. That might be a commander responsibility, but it's not feasible for the commander to do it. So
Right.
That's my kind of encapsulation of the shirt. If you want to add to, expand on, please go ahead.
So, by the book, we're there to provide the commander a mission-ready force, and we're there to advise the commander, like you mentioned, and to enforce good order and discipline. I mean, straight out of RAFI, that's what it says we're supposed to do. I will tell you absolutely that there are no two first sergeants who shirt in the same way. We all shirt differently because we all interpret things differently. We all, of course, have our own biases. That's just human nature. So, of course, no two shirts are going to be built exactly the same. I don't shirt the way my mentor did. There's 3 of us first sergeants in the med group here, and none of us first sergeant in the same way. We try to line things up so that everything is equitable and fair, and we're all tracking on the same page. But the way that we talk to people and the way that we handle situations isn't ever going to be exactly the same. You're absolutely right about the vacuum. It's been amazing to see the amount of things. Hey, Shirt, do you know anything about this? Hey, Shirt, can you take care of this for me? Hey, Shirt, do you know who I should call for so-and-so? Which is great. I mean, that's cool. You want people to come to you. You want to be approachable so that people come to you with questions. People come to you with problems. So you can kind of help them with that. To me, that's the biggest part of what I see my job as. Is I'm more of a liaison. I'm pointing people. I may not know exactly what to do, but I damn well know who to call. It's not Ghostbusters either. Like, I can point you in the direction of the resource. I can get you to the correct person that can help you solve this problem if I can't solve it myself. To me, that's the big thing. I'm an informational resource. Yeah, the discipline piece is there. I know you've heard the saying, 10% of your people take up 90% of your time, which, having been in the maintenance squadron, yeah, that's true. You've got those few bad apples that eat up a lot of your time, and you're trying every which way to try to get them back on the right path. And some people just can't get out of their own way. It's something I told my troops here and in maintenance. I tell flight chiefs. Unfortunately, the Air Force is not an orphanage. This is a great fit for a lot of people, and for some people it's not, and that should be okay. This doesn't have to be the perfect fit for you. This doesn't have to be somewhere where you're going to thrive, where you're going to be the best of the best of the best, sir. It's a great fit for guys like me coming out of high school, and gals coming out of high school. I just needed some discipline. I needed a direction. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I knew college wasn't for me, but to be able to kind of shepherd these folks, the folks that want to make it a career, helping them achieve those aspirations, pointing them in the right directions for personal and professional development. And for the ones that don't, just making sure they're at least meeting the standard and serving honorably. That's all I'm ever going to ask. Serve honorably, keep your ass out of trouble, and just do the right thing, would you please? And at the end of your 4 or 6 years or 8 years or 10 years, we will part ways amicably. You'll take your benefits. We will thank you for your service. You'll forever be a veteran. But everybody moves on, and no one's worse for wear. You're trying to prevent that 10% from continuing down that path.
Yeah, that's fair. Not counting current first sergeants you're serving with. We're not even talking about those. But you've been in the Air Force for 19 years, 8 months. You're in aircraft maintenance. You've been around the blocks. You've probably seen a lot of shirts in your time, both in your capacity as an airman, as a supervisor, as a expediter, flight chief, whatever. So you've probably seen a lot of shirts. Have you ever seen the wrong type of person as a first sergeant?
Without question.
Right. So what does that look like? And how do you think they get there, I guess, is the question.
I'm going to be honest. I think DSDing first sergeants is one of the worst ideas they've ever had.
Yeah, I agree.
Why on earth would you want someone
who doesn't want it?
Yeah, you're going to put someone who doesn't want the job, who doesn't want that workload, who doesn't want that responsibility, and you're going to make them one of the top 3 people in the squadron. Like, on what planet does that make sense? And I get it. They were short on shirts, and they were trying to find a way to fill that gap. But you would hope at the same time that as they interview with command chiefs, as they interview with, executive councils for the shirt councils at their respective bases, as they get to the first sergeant academy, that somewhere somebody along the line would say, WTF, man. Like, do you even want to be here? If you don't want to do this job, that's cool. Let's just cut bait and you go back to your career field and we'll find somebody else. It took me 3 years to become a first sergeant. And one of them, well, two of the cycles were with a command chief push. Like my base command chief literally calling our functional and being told, no, I'm not letting them go.
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned that because, like the DSD program, I understand what they were trying to do because I think a lot of it stemmed from, and maybe not all of it, but there was certainly a kernel that stemmed from the Lackland sort of sexual assault. It's like we have bad people in these positions, and there's certain positions where we need to have a better vetting process. And it seems like when people volunteer, you get abusive people in these positions that are seeking them out in order to be predators of some kind. And I'm sure there was many, many other contributing factors to the DSD process, but I certainly know that was at least one of the principal sort of reasons. So the idea behind DSD is that your command is going to find the people that have the skill set to do the job. And you're going to get like vectored. You're going to get told, hey, you're going to be on the list. You might get picked, you might not get picked, but we're looking for this job. And then what really happened, and let me know if it's what you experienced, your AMU or your superintendent, AMU, squadron, whatever it happened to be, would come up and go, hey, you've been here longer than 2 years, so now you're vulnerable for DSD. So you need to write down 3 of the jobs you would be willing to take if it was DSD. And a lot of people were like, I don't want any of these fucking jobs. And you'd have like a short list. It would be career, what was it? The career advisor or whatever, training instructor, TI, MTL, first sergeant, and there's probably 1 or 2 more in there, right? But if you don't want, like, you're not allowed to say, I don't want any of those. Like, they would make you put something down. And you would also get people that had, like, if they had their CCAF, they would get tagged for sure, but they didn't have the CCAF, they wouldn't. So now you've, like, incentivized people to not get a CCAF. And it's like, this whole thing is like, it doesn't work very well. And every year actually 6 months, you would get put up and you're always worried that you're going to get taken to another job you don't even want to do when you're just trying to keep getting good at the job you're at. And then you got guys like you that's like, I want to be a first sergeant. And I think first sergeant should strictly be a voluntary position, period. There should not be any forced, you're moving from your job to, of all the jobs, first sergeant, seriously, because that requires like a maternal or paternal sort of instinct for your unit. You like, this is my, like you said, you shepherd them in. It's like, this is your flock. These are your children. These are the people that you personally are invested in. And if you don't have that, if you don't want to do that, or what if like you're going through fucking marital problems or financial or any number of fucking things, and now is like not a good time to uproot and do this drastically different thing and take on other people's problems, that should absolutely be fucking considered. And in my experience, it wasn't. It was, we have a quota that we need to meet in the squadron, and you are on the list of people, and you need to put down 2 jobs. Is that kind of close to what your experience with DSD was as well?
Real close. Or even worse, guys wouldn't even get that consideration. Somebody somewhere, well, we don't have enough, and then somebody's name would get pushed up, and they selected 2 or 3 of these jobs, and then they found out, hey, I got this weird email from my person. Like, what is this DSD shit? Like, what is this? Oh yeah, you got put up to go be an MTI. What?
Yeah.
They get told after the fact, or God forbid if maintainers were not the best in the world about checking our email. God forbid 4 months down the road, somebody from the order room says, hey, you need to check your email. You got orders. Huh? I'm going to Lackland. I'm going to Shepherd. Like, what?
And you can't deny a DSD, right? Like, once you're selected, is there a way to like deny it without getting coded for non-promotion, non-reenlistment? I don't know.
I would have to research that. I don't want to give you that information there, but we'll circle back with you on that.
I think that sounds like the Air Force recipe for these types of things. So
right. I mean, we've heard the rumors and people saying, well, if I turn this down, then I've got to get out. And, you get told different things by personnel. So, but yeah, let me research that, and I'll definitely get you back.
Well, we won't research. If anybody listening knows the answer, just drop it in the comments. Or I'm going to operate as if you rejected DSD without some sort of exception to policy. You're probably going to get coded for non-promotion, non-reenlistment. And if anybody knows anything different, drop a comment. Or if you are curious about it, do your homework. Because I'm not going to task Branden with doing my homework. Because frankly, he's not my fucking first sergeant. So I'm not going to make him. I'm not going to make him do anything. So. And it's one of those things, like if you get tapped to be a first sergeant and you don't want to be, aren't you going to resent your people? And every time they come to you with a problem, aren't you going to be fucking angry about it? Right?
I mean, you've seen some really angry ones. Like we've all seen people that, in your opinion, there's no way in hell they should be a first sergeant, and you wonder how in the hell they got there. How did you even get this job? I'm, obviously not going to name names, but
Yep.
you see these people on TDYs, you see them on deployments, and you see them. More importantly, you don't see them
Yeah.
ever. You see them when you show up after you bed down, and then you don't see them for 5 more months until it's time to get your shit together and get out of town, and then they magically reappear. Like I've experienced that.
Yep.
I will say that there have been, in my experience within the world, there have been people that got DSD, and they're spectacular first sergeants.
Yep.
Didn't want to do it. They didn't want to come to this career field. There's no way in hell they wanted the job, and now they're here, and they don't want to leave. It's kind of like me. In 2010, I got the opportunity to go to Shepherd to be a tech school instructor. I had a really sweet-ass FTD job lined up there at Shaw. We were TDY and got approached by the flight chief. Hey, Branden, you were going to be an instructor, right? Yeah, man. Did my FTD orders drop? Oh, orders dropped. Well, why'd you say it like that? You're going to Shepherd. The hell? I went to Shepherd kicking and screaming, but I left Shepherd kicking and screaming. That was a great 4 years.
Yeah, when I talked to Hoppy about training a few episodes ago, he said something very similar where he got non-vol to Shepherd, and then he really enjoyed teaching and he enjoyed the experience, and he pretty much lived the training and sort of environment thereafter, and he's retired and doing course development in the civilian sector as well. Yeah, I feel like becoming an instructor, being forced to become an instructor is not nearly as egregious as being forced to be a first sergeant, because first of all, an instructor is typically within your arena of knowledge, so it seems a bit, you just get a T prefix, call it a day, and you get all the training and stuff, but you're still teaching what you've been doing for 10 to 12 or however long you've been doing it. But getting DSD to be a first sergeant against your will, especially if you don't even know that you're on the list for DSD, and then you get popped for first sergeant, which you may not even have the right skill set for, because frankly, I would see a lot of the chiefs more interested in just filling the DSD quota and not really scrutinizing who would really be a good who has that toolkit to be a good first sergeant.
When you mention quotas, where does that come from?
Well, it's slots. It's AFPC. Yeah. They need these many people, and they do like a fair share across the MAGCOMs based on the mission requirements, how many people, which is really frustrating because it's like, then your career field manager's like, no, I'm not going to release these certain people. And then it's just, I don't know. Then it turns into a non-fair share at that point, I guess.
And every year, these functionals are sitting down and hashing out, well, we're only going to let 10 people go this year. These other 18 that you've tasked me with, like, can anybody else help me out here? And it's a barter system. And I get it. That's the reason the functionals are in the seats that they're in, is because they know their career fields. They understand their manning. We trust that they're projecting out so that we don't have massive shortfalls, because there's been a mass exodus, and I know they're doing the best that they can do. But at the same time, like you're saying, when you have quoted slots, you're saying we have to have this many from each wing, and then we're going to have this many at the MAGCOM and this many from wherever else. You put people in a box and you force people to make decisions that they don't want to do. You hope at the end of the day that it works out, and I mean, 99 times out of 100 it's going to.
And I wonder if you are in a career field that's struggling manning wise, so I'll just say resources in general, right? If you're in a career field that's struggling resource wise, I wonder if you're even going to get DSD'd, or if they're going to pick another career field in that unit. Like I'm going to operate off the AMU sort of template because it's easy. If you have so few avionics masters or techs or whatever, and you're just struggling, aren't you going to, even though you have great potential for them to be a shirt, like let's say a master, but they have all the tools in the toolkit, but you're short on them, you're going to nope, but I have these master sergeants over here in weapons, and they're fucking awful, and they're dragging my section down, and this is my chance to get them out. And I just wonder, we see it all the time with QA, we see it all the time with all these positions where maintainers kind of slide around or slide into temporarily. Very often, the chiefs are afraid to give their best guy because that guy is necessary to sustain the mission. And very often for these positions, they give their B or C team type of guys to go over there. And then it's like, okay, we're DSDing, and then we're not even allowing the best to get these positions because we're gatekeeping the chief is literally deciding which people he's willing to give up, and most chiefs are going to be more interested in their own health, their own unit health, than the broad Air Force health at large. I mean, I'm just speculating, but that seems like that was my experience.
I mean, we can both be honest about that. Like, as production, like, who do you want working that ADG time change? You
Right.
want your badass staff sergeant, or do you want that brand new staff sergeant that really doesn't know his or her ass from a hole in the ground and is still trying to figure out what it means to be a 7 level? Like, who do you want on that? As a pro super, as an expediter, like, every day and twice on Sunday, who are you going to put on that?
Yep.
You know, and I will say, you know, we had a spectacular command chief at Shaw, and when people interviewed that he knew wasn't going to be right for the job, he had no qualms telling them, this ain't for you. Like, this is not where you belong. You know, I'm happy to vector you in these other couple of directions, but you know, maybe where you want to be isn't the right place. And you hope that chiefs do that all the way up through the chain. Like, I know that you listed this job, but you really think you got the right temperament for that?
I guess, how does that interview, like, can an interview be bullshitted? I mean, I can answer, if I know the right answer, whether that's my actual answer or not, I know how to answer, so that way I look like I would be a good shirt. You know what I mean?
Well, we're taught in maintenance, like, we've got a master's in bullshit.
Right.
It just is what it is. I think if you know your audience, you probably could. Like, if you were familiar with the command, like, say I'm going up for an interview with the command chief to be a first sergeant, and I know the command chief previously from, you know, having been on top, whatever it may be. Like, I've had interaction with, so I know how to tailor my answer. It probably could be, possibly. I'm not saying it's impossible. I mean, if you're that good at it and you know this person, I'm sure you probably could.
But, like, if I was asked a question, you know, what do you think the typical, or what do you think about the commander's use of authority in a unit? Like, in your experience, is it effective or is it appropriate? Like, the honest part of me goes, I think a lot of times commanders abuse their authority and there's no fucking checks or balances on it. And by the way, I think that we have so few maintenance officers that the standard for commanders is getting lower and lower and lower. And you got some shitty ass commanders out there. And I would tell them to fuck off, and they're not going to destroy my people. Like, that's my true. And I could answer the question like, well, you know, I understand my job is to support the commander, and he ultimately has authority. And if he makes a decision and it's okay, then I'm going to do my best to make sure that the enlisted force is able to kind of digest that and understand the vision and moving forward. So that way we can be mission capable. Like, that was two radically different answers. And I don't even need to know my audience. Like, I can just bullshit through there. So I just wonder, I mean, I'm not knocking any command chiefs. I think it's at least good they do interview, because there might be some dumb people that just don't know how to bullshit these answers. But it bothers me that the final type of gate is an interview with a command chief that may not know how to, I don't know, I may not know how to sniff out somebody.
You also, you know, if they do say you're going to get picked up, then of course you're going to shadow. Typically about 30 days before you leave for the academy, you're going to have the shirt council, executive council get in contact with you, and they'll hook you up with 2 or 3 different shirts for you to shadow for those 20 to 30 days. Number one, so that you can see what it's really like to be a first sergeant, and number two, and probably more importantly, so we can see you, so we can talk to you, so we figure out what you're about, what you're like. You know, if you're going to be a local hire, not because it's, you know, like a good old boys club or a good old girls club, anything like that. It's, do you have the right temperament and the right attitude to be able to do this job? And that's coming from other shirts. And then the exec council will gather the opinions of the people that they've shadowed behind. And that's really kind of the final gate. Is the exec council can go to the command chief and say, you need to turn this off. Like, this is not going to work. I can tell you now, I've got, you know, A, B, and C with this individual. I've got concerns about this, and you need to turn this off. And it can absolutely get turned off.
That's good.
Really, that shadow program immediately prior to the First Sergeant Academy, like, that's really your final gateway. That's when you're actually leaving your AMU or wherever it is you work, and you're going to hold a First Sergeant's pocket and really see the day in, day out, and see if you really want to be a part of that.
So I was an acting shirt for not very long. It felt like a long time. I assume that's probably fairly typical. But it was in 2014, right before I went to Holloman. I was in between jobs, essentially. Like, I was a floating master, and I wanted to be a shirt anyway. So they needed someone to fill in. I think my first sergeant was going to either senior NCO academy or something, so he was out for a while. He did leave in conjunction. It was like 3 months, and it was like a really good experience for me. The first commander I was working with, it was right before I changed the command. The first commander I was working with, I didn't have an issue with him, but I just didn't know him that well. And then a new commander came in, and we did really well. It was Colonel Lemery now. I've had him on for, I think, 1 or 2 podcasts talking about squadron leadership. But it was very much I just enjoyed, the biggest thing was, what sticks out the most for me was I had an airman that had a child that had a medical issue, and he was just getting his ass thoroughly kicked by the EFMP program / office. He couldn't get to the base he needed to go to with the specialist, and he was getting this huge runaround. And I think he'd been doing it for like 3 or 4 months, trying to work through all the agencies to get it done. And it was just like, he was a senior airman, he was getting shut down. He was like mature, but you're, with that amount of rank, no one's going to necessarily listen to you.
Right.
And he shot me an email or called me, and he's like, Sergeant McGee, is there something you can do to help out? I said, I want you to bring in every email you sent, every form you filled out, every phone number you have, every contact you have, just come into my office. And we're going to sit in my office from 8 o'clock in the morning until we solve your fucking problem. And that's what we're going to do. And really it was nice, but it frustrated me at the same time. When I would call up and say that I was the first sergeant, it was like doors opened. Like people just like, oh, okay, like this, they recognize I was trying to get something done that was important. And they just cut away all the bullshit. And all I could think of is, why the fuck couldn't I get this as like a flight chief? Like I was not a first sergeant. I was an acting first sergeant. I made sure I dropped the acting when I was trying to get a little bit more leverage. But also, like, as a flight chief, this would be the exact same fucking thing I would do as a flight chief, and I would probably run into a lot of the same obstacles this guy was. And for whatever reason, saying I was a first sergeant was the magical key for everybody to go, oh, we can make this. Like, it seems like sometimes people are seeking obstacles so they can not do things. Like, oh, they're just looking for a justification to say no so they can turn everything off.
Right.
But it seems like when you drop that you're a first sergeant, you're trying to get something done, that all of a sudden they switch their mindset to, I need to help solve this, so I need to like overcome these obstacles. I assume by your reaction, you've had a similar experience as a first sergeant as well, right?
Bro, it's crazy. I've had this discussion with my wife. Even when I sewed on master sergeant, the different level of customer service that you receive as a senior NCO versus being a tech sergeant is insane. And then I started living in that diamond world as a full-time assistant, and I would call them up and say, hey, I'm the assistant first sergeant for EMS. Yes, sir. What can I do for you? What do you need? Like, okay. Well, I mean, if you could just, come on up and just come in this back door over here, and you just come on over to my desk, and we'll just solve it right here. And it's like, are you shitting me right now?
Yeah.
Like, you're telling me that this problem that this senior airman has had, let's use, for example, a pay issue. They've been fighting this pay issue, and they've been running circles for 3 months now, and it took us 10 fucking minutes to solve it. Are you kidding me right now?
Yep. That's frustrating. It's nice, and it's frustrating at the same fucking time.
Well, it should never, if it's that easy to solve, why the hell is it coming to my desk?
Yep.
Why? Why could we not just solve this for this airman and be done with it? Rather than, chasing hither and yon, you could have just picked up the phone, called somebody, the exact same person you knew to call, because you knew when I walked in the door exactly who to fucking call. And you did, and it solved the problem. Why was that level of customer service not delivered in the first place? And that's one of my major frustrations, and it's something I tell people all the time, is my whole job now, if I have to go do fucking river dance on somebody's desk or piss somebody off to get you what you need, I'm more than happy to do that.
You turn into like a glorified Karen, right? Am I using the right?
It feels like that some days.
Yeah, I just need to talk to the manager. I'm going to get my shirt, and we're going to talk to the fucking manager, and we're going to get this sorted out.
On the flip side, on the receiving end of that, I've tried to figure out, what could cause that type of reaction. You say the words first sergeant, or you say the words chief or commander, and the level is completely different, like you said, and like we both experienced. Why is that? Is it a fear of getting in trouble? Like, if I don't solve this, I'm going to get in trouble, and my first sergeant or commander is going to get a phone call? And
maybe.
Like, is that? I don't like it. And I tell them all the time, I'm not mad at you. I'm just trying to understand how this got to my desk in the first place.
Yep.
Because if you can solve this problem with me, why did it take me coming over here? Why did it take me picking up the phone? Why was this level of service not delivered to this customer? Why did it take me getting involved? And there's never a good answer. It's something that my mentor did teach me, is when you go into those situations, to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Like, what can we do as first sergeants to help you? Like, what can we do to make this process easier on your end so that my people in my squadron don't have this issue again? How can we communicate it better within the squadron so that we can make sure that you've got everything you need the first time around, and we're not going in circles? Well, give us this form, now give us this form, now give us. What can we do better to interact and solve problems quicker? And it's just going to make everybody's life easier. So coming at it from that angle, rather than storming in the back door to finance and being like, bring me your manager. Like, it feels like that sometimes. Ain't gonna lie, it feels like that. Like, it feels like I'm constantly calling somebody and trying to figure out a situation, and at the same time understanding that you've got your airman side of the story, and then you're going to get the agency side of the story, and the truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
Sure, but it's the concept of, as soon as I drop the first sergeant, as soon as I drop that, then all of a sudden everything becomes easier.
Well, shit happens.
Right. So, and I'm sure a lot of people have kind of read it. I wrote a big long story about how I imploded my career. It's called "Smoke Doesn't Always Mean Fire." It's like this big, huge 8-part thing. But I noticed, especially towards the end of my career, and I suspect it might be the wrong type of people were first sergeants. They were just yes men, and they were just always supporting the commander. But I also speculate at the same time that I think sometimes commanders, especially when they've been a commander for a long time, and when you're a commander in the seat, very rarely do you get to see the positive stuff. It's like, yeah, during promotions, during annual awards and stuff, you get to see the good. But very often what's populating their calendar between those events is Article 15's disciplinary action, government travel card delinquencies, or misuse of government, whatever it might be. A bunch of infractions and stuff. And I think it kind of skews the perception of the people serving in the unit. Like, I hypothesized that, or I said that final commander that I had basically felt like he was leading a unit full of fucking criminals, and he just hadn't caught him yet. And I wonder, as a first sergeant, do you ever feel that sensation that you see so much negativity and you don't balance it with as much positive sort of things, that you start to get a skewed perception of the people that serve in your unit?
I mean, honestly, it seems like, from the shirts I've talked to, those first couple of years, it's not so bad. Like, you're not too beat up, you're still motivated, you're still full of energy. But somewhere in year 3, and I don't know if maybe, since I'm not there yet, that may be a feeling that I experienced later down the road. Right now, sometimes it can feel that way. I mean, if we're being honest, sometimes it can feel that way, because you get the GTC delinquency email. Now you're chasing that down.
Yep.
And now I've got a no-show for DDR, and I've got to chase that down. No-show disappointment. Now I got to chase that down. And then, oh, by the way, Thursday we're going to head out of strike. So through the week you may get 1 or 2 good things that you cling to. And I mean, I'm lucky to have a wife that's spectacular, and she allows me to vomit when I'm home. Yeah. And I can just unload, and she takes it. Of course, I reciprocate that to her when it's been a shitty day for her. I take it from her too, but she allows me to decompress. She allows me to get those things out so that it's not carried over into the next day, because that could get really damn dangerous. Like, when you're carrying that type of negativity day in and day out, like you said, you lose sight of all the awesome shit that people are doing day in and day out, like literally killing themselves to get the mission done. They're working late. They're staying long hours. They're doing more than they were ever asked to do. They're freaking crushing it. And you can lose sight of that. You absolutely can. And it can sometimes feel that way. When the desk phone blows up for 30 minutes straight, and then your cell phone starts pinging for another 2 hours straight, and then you get this phone call, and then you get this email, and then somebody stops by with everybody's favorite question: "Hey, Shirt, got a minute?"
Right. I
mean, I've always got a minute, but it's never
a minute.
How's your day doing? How you doing today? No, let's be real. Like, nobody's sticking their head going in, "Hey, Shirt, you got a minute?" You're doing fantastic. That's all. You don't need anything. No, I just want to tell you you're doing great.
Yeah, it reminds me of a lead super I had, Eric Munson, who I came up to him one time and said, hey, I need to hold this jet down to work this particular issue. He's like, you know what? I never get anybody to come up to me and ask, hey, I need my jet to fly more. Anytime anybody ever comes up to me, it's always to ask to hold the jet down. And I'd really like for somebody to come up and say, we need to fly my jet more. And I'm like, okay, that's not how this.
Put it on the schedule, please.
Yeah, that's not how this economy or market works. So you might be in the wrong job. So I want to go back to the talk about the trust that you have to, as a first sergeant, you have to build. So there's like a tension there. Like you have to establish trust with your commander, and then you also have to establish trust with your enlisted force. And when you have a good commander, there's not much tension there. It's not difficult, right? Because it's very obvious the commander and the enlisted force, or the commander's moving in a direction that's going to make the enlisted force better. There's no sort of abuse or any sort of thing like that going on. But I've seen, certainly I might be a rare instance, but obviously talking to people throughout the years, and it's not every commander, but I feel like everyone in the Air Force that's been in as long as you and I have has always had at least one really shitty commander that you just feel is a fucking tyrant, right? And as a shirt, that's got to be a very difficult position. Obviously, I'm not assuming that your current commander is such a person, because I probably imagine he wouldn't let you on this podcast, right? So we're not talking about current. So really what I'm going to ask you to do is kind of imagine your experience with a bad commander sometime in your career, and then implant that sort of input into the scenario where you're a first sergeant now. Like, how as a first sergeant do you balance between building trust with your commander, maintaining trust with your enlisted force, when your commander, might be operating within the confines of legal authority, but it's like one of those climate assessment surveys that would definitely get him fucking fired. You know what I'm saying?
I don't have to imagine a bad commander.
Right.
I had one whose very first commander's call, literally verbatim, said, I don't give a shit. I'll work you 12 to 16 hours if I have to. I'm going to get my sorties.
Yeah, that guy. So let's do a scenario where you're that guy's shirt. What would you do?
As far as, when we're talking about building trust, not just with the commander, but with the folks of the squadron, for me, it comes down to really two things: honesty and transparency. Well, and I'll throw in a third. It's not a word, but being genuine. Mm-hmm. They need to know that I'm real. They need to know that I'm honest, and they need to know that I'm transparent. There's no freaking wizard back behind the curtain yanking on the strings, and my mouth is saying one thing, but back here we're really doing another. I think it's not only possible that you can be loyal and also build trust with your commander, and also build trust and loyalty among your squadron. I think if you're real, if they know that you're real, and because you're telling them the truth. If they ask your honest opinion, you can give them your honest opinion. A lot of the times, and you've seen people do it, that you got your U.S. Air Force patch over here and your name patch over here, and it'll be, well, Branden thinks that here's the way to do it. And obviously understanding who you're talking to. You're not going to go down to an A1C that Branden thinks this is horseshit. Mm-hmm. Understanding the people that you can do that with. But also, if you're dealing, for me personally, if I was dealing with a commander like that, also one of my obligations, I've got to protect my commander. I've got to protect my commander from getting himself, sometimes from himself or herself. You may be making a legal decision. Sure, it's within the realms of the UCMJ. You're not asking anyone, you're not asking somebody to kill refugees. It's not an obviously immoral or illegal order. But at the same time, I would constantly be in that commander's ear. Probably to the point that I would annoy him or her bad enough, I'd probably get fired.
Yep.
I probably would.
I feel like a commander like that probably would.
But at the same time, I view that as my responsibility. I can't be, if I'm scared that being honest and forthcoming with my commander, respectfully and tactfully, of course, sometimes maybe not so tactfully, because I may need to make a point.
Depending on the audience, right.
The good old swear word may just help emphasize a point. But I would constantly be in that commander's ear. Like, we're seeing this indicator. We're seeing, so many more visits. I've gotten so many more visits, people looking for mental health resources. You think that could be contributory to these long shifts you've got them working? They're not getting breaks. They're constantly working weekends. Is there a way that we can try to scale things back? Or, can we ramp up like to Thursday and try to, fit more sorties in there? Because obviously operations That's not my lane.
Yep.
It's not. That's going to be more the chief and the MOO and the commander's lane. But while I'm apprised of operations, that's not my primary concern. So you're having to find a way to constantly be in that commander's ear. And I think you're bringing the issues that you're seeing to the commander, and you're being honest about it. You're being direct about it. My mentor, and he gave me a phrase that I absolutely love, and it's a loyal heretic. And I would hope, and it's something I've told the commanders that I've worked for, is you're always going to have a loyal heretic. What we say behind closed doors and the conversations that we have behind closed doors, you can trust will always remain behind closed doors. And when we leave your office or wherever we're sitting and talking, whenever we leave that room, we will be in lockstep. We will be.
Boy, I was definitely a disloyal heretic because I recorded those conversations in that room and then put them on blast. So I'm probably not cut from the same cloth as you per se. That was a unique situation. But there was many times where I would disagree, frankly, like this is the wrong decision and here's why I think it's the wrong decision and this is what the outcome I think it's going to be. And if it wasn't illegal, I didn't walk out and immediately start telegraphing it to everybody. It's just like, well, that was a mistake, and I'll see what happens, and hopefully I'm wrong. But very often, I wasn't, so that's unfortunate. But I guess the question is,
of all the commanders in your career, you mentioned the one. Was that the only commander that you really
that was terrible? Well, I guess the question is that were awful, or that I gave feedback to? I'm sorry, I missed the question.
That you perceived as awful. Would you say that the majority of the commanders in your career have been good commanders? They operate from a legal, moral, and ethical standpoint, or has the vast majority of your experience been?
I would say I only had. So unfortunately, that one commander I had him twice. So it was like a prolonged period. But I'm still counting that as one because he was one commander. I had a really terrible group commander that was very similar, or they were just detached from what, like that, they were just detached from human nature. So like two, which really in the grand scheme of things, over a 20-year career, you're looking at a combined, but that's also combined 5 years, right? Because I had 3 years with the one and 2 years with the other. That's like a quarter of my career was spent under shitty commanders. Like that's not I guess that's the problem. You get a bad commander, if you're there for his entire tenure, that's 2 years. And that's a fucking long time to suffer under that.
No, I don't disagree. In my experience, I've only really had one that was like blatantly in your face. I don't give a shit. You people are pieces of meat with eyes, and I don't give a damn.
Yep.
I've only had the one. Obviously I can't speak for everyone, but I would like to think, at least in my experience, the people I've talked to at the different bases I've been to, that the number of tyrants is far, far smaller than the number of high quality commanders.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. The ratio is definitely in favor of the positive commanders, but I think the impacts of the tyrants is amplified by quite a fucking bit. So even though you only have 1 out of 10, that one is doing a shitload of damage to a lot of people, and it's going to reverberate through their career and through that unit,
And to your point, I think, to continue down that path of what I do as his first sergeant or her first sergeant is, again, staying in their ear, giving them that honest and direct feedback, showing them tangible data and indicators that show that the actions that you're taking are not just detrimental to your people, but we both know, having worked in the maintenance arena, you drive people down long enough and your metrics are going to go down too. Everything else suffers. You run your people into the ground and everything else suffers.
Yep.
I think if you're providing that commander tangible data points, which a lot of people, if we're being honest, don't want to do the research and the legwork to really do.
That's fair.
They just want to say this shit sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like a climate survey. We tell people all the time, don't just put this shit sucks. Tell me what the shit is, why it sucks, and how you suggest we fix it. So a lot of people don't want to do that with legwork, I think. But if you're providing that commander constant, tangible data points as feedback, honest feedback, being that loyal heretic, I'm not going to talk smack about you out of this room. I'm never going to go behind you and backstab. But providing that commander that, and also importantly too, leveraging your chief, especially in an AMXS, Shaw with, 3 AMUs, which I know they're doing a different thing now, but when I was at Shaw, it was 3 AMUs at 1.4, and then it was an AMXS. So you've got 4 first sergeants and 4 chiefs, all for this one commander, plus your OIC. So you're leveraging that chain as well.
Yep.
You know, understand, talking, socializing these points with your fellow flight chiefs and senior NCOs and chiefs and OICs, so that as a united front, you're approaching this commander and be like, I'm not just on my own island here. I'm not just an asshole. Like I'm not trying to tell you that what you're doing is wrong just because I'm an asshole. Like, all these other people agree with me, and here's the tangible data points why. Here's why we feel this way, and here's what the math proves out. You know, and obviously at the end of the day, the commander is going to hopefully take your advice, is going to, you know, consult with the chief, and hopefully consult with their peers, consult with other commanders within their network, you know, consult with their group commander, and hopefully come to the decision and kind of turn things around. But if it doesn't, at the end of the day, me as a first sergeant, I'm trying to soften as many blows as possible. You know, I'm trying to keep people's spirits up. You know, if that means that I've got to do the stereotypical burger burn every once in a while, personally, like if that means I got to come out, and this is just me personally, I'm not suggesting that shirts do this, but if I've got to go out to freaking Sam's Club and drop $200 on some hamburgers and grill them up just so I can walk around and hand them to people out on the ramp or in the smoke pit or whatever, I'm going to do that. I'm going to try to soften the blow as much as humanly possible, because like you said, that commander has an exceptional influence. And if that's somebody's first commander, they could be a talented mechanic, but we're going to lose them.
Yep.
We're going to lose them because they don't want to be there for that shit. They can, you know, if I want to be road hard and put up wet, I can go work for Delta and make a hell of a lot more money than I'm making now. So why should I stay here? So I think when you start seeing those retention issues, when you start seeing the mental health issues, you start providing those data points to that commander, and you just hope to God they turn around. And if not, you up channel. You know, like we're all taught, if you can't solve the problem at this level, you up channel to the next level, and you hope that somebody gets in his or her ear and gets them back on the right path.
So when I was an acting first sergeant, we had 2 DUIs in one weekend, like separate parties, separate sort of things. It was a Friday night DUI and a Saturday night DUI. And I don't know if it's because I was an acting first sergeant or if my commander hadn't been thinking it, and he listens. So Dave Lemery, message me from this podcast and let me know if I'm right or if I'm wrong. But as a shirt, I didn't feel like I had failed when they got a DUI, or I didn't fail. Anytime somebody came in for an Article 15, I didn't feel like I failed. But in hindsight, I feel like I should have, because I am actually responsible for the discipline, and I'm, as a shirt, I should be responsible for all the behavior of the enlisted force. And I would expect my commander to turn to me and go, hey, Chris, what the fuck is going on? And what have you been doing to prevent? And obviously it didn't work. And what are you going to do to adjust? But that conversation never happened. It was, here's what we want to do going forward to kind of curb this. But I never felt like I had personally failed. And in hindsight, I feel like I should have felt that. Do you see that you are responsible for all the behavior enlisted in your unit? Or are you just is it you're along for the ride the way the commander is?
For me, it's yes and no. I absolutely feel that the things that happen within the squadron are a direct reflection of myself, the chief, and the commander. Because ultimately, when they get in the blotter and people read the blotter, certain people are associated. You know, when you see the name, for me, it's MDSS. Like when you see people see MDSS in the squadron, other shirts or commanders see MDSS in the squadron, the commanders know who the commander of that squadron is. The shirts know who the shirt in that squadron is. The chiefs know who the chief in that squadron is. So the issues that you have within your squadron, I do take them personally because it's a reflection of you and your culture, I think. It speaks to the level of discipline within your unit. But at the same time, you can't possibly prevent everything. You know, especially here in Las Vegas, people are going to derp. Like it's straight up, people are going to make some really bad choices sometimes. And no matter how involved you've been in their life, no matter how, you know, quote unquote, intrusive your leadership has been, even how compassionate your leadership has been, you could be best first sergeant on the planet, and at some point you're going to have a DUI within your squad.
Yeah, that's fair.
You cannot stop people from making bad choices. You hope that you set a culture within your squadron where people understand that that type of behavior is not acceptable. You know, committing a felony It's not okay. Again, it's not something that we're going to sweep under the rug. It's just not. We've all heard stories from back in the day, different things happen. And I think that's that's a separate tangent we can go down if you want, as far as equity of punishment and things of that nature. But for me, it's yes and no. I do take it personally because, again, one of my jobs is to help protect my commander, not because they need me I'm not their bodyguard, but to protect that commander, to protect that squadron, to protect that chief, the reputation, the image of the squadron itself. So I think it can be reflective, and I do take it personally when things like that happen. And I wonder, like, what did I not do? Or what did I say wrong? Or what message did I not get across? Was there something I could have said? Was there something I could have done? Was there a resource I could have pushed out to let people know about? And sometimes there are absolutely things that we have to improve on, and we've got to get better at. And sometimes people just make a really shitty choice.
So you said earlier when you were talking about with like when the unit is getting together, and I know you're in a MDSS, but I'm just gonna pretend like you're in a maintenance squadron just to make this easier to digest for myself and the listeners. But you said like operations is not necessarily your lane because you're more focused on the people and all that stuff. But how much of ops tempo and operations decisions, pro super behaviors, expediter behaviors, how many jets are broke, how many jets are on the schedule, how many people there are, all those operation items, how much does that play into your personnel morale? And shouldn't a first sergeant, because I wasn't involved in operations when I was doing the acting first sergeant, and I don't think I've seen first sergeants involved in it, but how much of the regular maintainer morale is dictated by operations, and why isn't the first sergeant involved in that process, besides the fact they may not be a maintainer, right?
Well, and that's part of it. I think separate the first sergeant from having control of like operational processes and things like that, because typically your first sergeant, like in the AMU, is not going to be a maintainer.
Yep.
They do not send first sergeants to be a first sergeant in their career field because it's just a conflict of interest. Maintainers and cops, we're harder on ourselves than anybody else. When it comes to punishment, when it comes to discipline, you've heard the phrase, we eat our own.
Yep.
And we are typically heavy-handed when it comes to those titles. So it's kind of a conflict of interest. You want a fresh perspective in there, not just for the squadron, but for the command as well, because there are things that people see and have experienced outside of our career field that they can bring in, that they can give us insight into how to operate better, how to take care of people better, how to lead them, because they've got a different experience from, in a different lens. They see things differently. For me as a first sergeant, I'm absolutely going to be aware of what's going on with ops. I'm going to understand. It's my job to understand the ops tempo. Understand the things, knowing that we're going to have a phase 2 exercise coming up. I need to know how that's going to affect people. I need to know the tertiary effects of that, and asking those questions. Like, has everybody got their childcare situated? Making sure that they're ready to execute those operations. It should not be my place to dictate the process. That's why you got to chief. That's why you got to move. You got a chief. You've got flight chiefs and section chiefs. They understand the intricacies and the ins and outs of their sections and flights better than I, as a first sergeant, ever could. I feel like it's my responsibility to absolutely understand operations, but it is not my responsibility to dictate operations. There are plenty of other people. You've sat in a morning meeting just like I have. There are plenty of other people that are more than happy to help dictate operations. I will say that, at least from my MDSS perspective now, sitting in the staff meeting is educational for me. Mm-hmm. To see the way that different organizations operate and how they do business, and then to see the toll that takes on their people. To something I try to use, I try to correlate it to what I know in maintenance.
So do you think you would be a better first sergeant? I'm gonna sideline the conflict of interest piece because I personally don't buy that. But let's say, do you think you would be a better first sergeant if you were in an F-16 unit than a first sergeant in a MDSS?
Because I know the world?
Mm-hmm.
Probably.
Yeah.
But it's a temperament that I've deliberately grown and developed. I don't think that everyone, I probably shouldn't speculate here, but I don't think that everyone is willing to really take that self-assessment and step back and try to figure out your blind spots. We've all done the 4 lenses mm-hmm. and personality assessments, but how seriously do people really take that stuff?
That's fair.
There has to come a time, if I was going to stay in maintenance, there has to be a self-realization there that the way that I've operated previously is not the way that I can continue to operate going forward, because my role is very, very different now. It's very, very different. So Could I be a better first sergeant? Probably.
Well, I guess what I'm driving at, like, you have 19 years experience. Well, I mean, recent acting, but at least 18 years experience working F-16s, right? Tours of Korea, you've been at Shaw, which means it's been, ACC, CAF stuff, exercises, deployments, you've done the whole gamut of F-16, the F-16 world. So if you are like a shirt in an F-16 unit, maybe not at Shaw, let's put you at, Nellis or Osan or wherever, right? Aren't you going to be able to like go, hey, you guys are doing trip turns through the weekend. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, our people are going to get ground up. You would have that experience and that situational awareness. You'd be able to go to the commander and go, hey, the guys in production are working these guys into the ground, and you're going to get people you're going to get ARIs going up, because we all know that the harder you ride your people and destroy them, typically alcohol becomes a pretty quick outlet. We're going to get domestic violence stuff going up because the tensions that they're bringing from work is going to come to home. We're going to get all those things, right? But you would be able to see that because of your time in F-16 maintenance to go, this is not a normal tempo. This is not sustainable. And I've seen people do this before, and it destroys everyone. But you'd be able to do that, right?
Well, I would counter that. If you've got a first sergeant that is involving themselves and familiarizing themselves with ops, they're also senior NCOs. And as a flight chief, as a section chief, I viewed that as part of my responsibility, as well as kind of like a feeler for a first sergeant. Like I'm looking for those type of indicators so that I can up channel if I need to. So that if I can't take care of it in the operational portion by going through the chief or the senior move, if I cannot resolve it through that channel, then I can go to the shirt and be like, this is what I'm seeing. Like, this is what we're doing. This is what we're forecasted to do. And you would hope that a first sergeant would do that regardless of their AFSC, that they would take that advice from their senior NCOs and be able to advise the commander appropriately.
Well, okay. So in my experience as a flight chief slash, go-to guy, let's say like senior tech sergeant up to when I retired, I never had a first sergeant come up to me and go, hey, Chris, is the ops tempo, is our mission going to ground the guys up? That conversation never fucking happened. And I don't know if that I'm unique, but I don't remember anybody else saying, hey, my shirt came up to me and asked about the amount of stories we're flying, the amount of hours we're working. That conversation doesn't happen. And I think it's because a lot of shirts go, that's not my lane. And in fairness to shirts, as a flight chief, I didn't push back as much as I could because I think I was so task saturated with my personnel piece that I didn't have the bandwidth to reach out and go, hey, what the fuck is production doing with my people? Like, what's going on here? Because I had so much on my plate doing all this stuff. And I wonder if shirts are in a similar position where they have so much work to do as a shirt that they don't have the bandwidth to expand to look at the operations to see how much operations is affecting morale. And then compound that with they're also a public affairs person that is now in an AMU and they're just wholly out of their element.
Right. And, having been that assistant first sergeant, I mean, it's absolutely insane. The number of plates you're trying to juggle and the number of hats you're trying to wear, it's so much. It really is. Like you get really damn good at multitasking, or you get a really big notepad and a planner. Like, I live and die by my calendar. Everything that I need to do, it goes in my calendar and it's colored a certain way. If I've got a meeting, because I'm a shirt for two different squadrons here, and they have their own separate colors. If I got a meeting with this commander, he's got a color. If I got a meeting with that commander, he's a color. And if I've got, some stuff for the shirt council, that's a color. Everything is on my calendar. Everything is tracked. You are so task saturated, and I think that's part of it as well, that I think there has to be an inherent trust within the operational chain from the chief and the move on down, that people will come through that chain with problems that they're seeing and things that they're noticing and wondering and pushing up and saying, is there anything that we can do about this? I'm just as guilty as you are.
Yeah.
Especially this type of year, brother. Like, December rolls around, you got fourth quarters, you got annuals, you got staff sergeant EPRs. You're hopefully closing out your tech sergeant EPRs. If you're not, your ass is in sling because now you're way late and you got people breathing down your neck. And you do lose that bandwidth. You absolutely do, because you're so saturated. And I think maybe that's part of the reason is you're trying to reinforce that trust through the operational chain, that there are going to be people brave enough, or people like us with a big enough mouth, to be like, this is bullshit. You're killing my guys, and it's got to freaking stop.
Yep.
You hope that people are going to say that. I've got my own opinions about, yes men and promotion process and how that all plays together and the optics of who you are as a person. But I also think that if you are raising those concerns, here's what sucks, here's why it sucks,
Yep.
here's what it's doing, and here's the tangible impact. If you can articulate that, people are going to listen. I mean, everybody's heard the stories of, well, back in my day, but it truly, at least in my experience, even in Korea, the year I was, my most recent year as a senior NCO in Korea, it was different there. Even just the mindset was different. And
Yep.
just from my experience, obviously, I don't think everybody feels the way that I feel. Leadership and the operational chain is more receptive. I think they are more sensitive to that now. I'm not saying that's the case everywhere.
Yep.
But I think overall, Air Force leadership is better than I've seen it in a really, really long time. And I'm not saying that because I'm a habitual blue Kool-Aid drinker or anything like that. I'm just saying from my experience in the senior NCOs that I'm seeing, the chiefs that I'm seeing, the first sergeants I'm seeing, the level of engagement, the level of actual genuine concern, and not just the illusion of concern, the amount of genuine concern and the words that you hear people say when they're not in front of the squadron, when they're around people that they trust, where they can really say what they want to say.
Yep.
When you hear the words that people are saying, I don't know that, at least at a squadron leadership level, because that's where my experience is at, I don't know that it's ever been any better. They're more engaged and they're more genuine, and they actually give a shit more than at any other time in my career. I mean, we all had generational chiefs and commanders and things like that. We've all worked for those dudes and gals that were just freaking all-stars, and that you don't forget, and you use an example for who you want to be. But I don't know. I know it sounds very Air Forcey, so to speak. But
So we got to wrap up, and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. And I'm very cognizant that your commander's probably listening to this. So, what do you hate about being a first sergeant, and what do you love about being a first sergeant?
I'll start with the love first, because that's just the easier one for me. I love the interpersonal interaction that I get every single day. I love the ability to talk to people, them to come in to talk to me, to bring me their problems, to bring me their worries, bring me their concerns, and to be able to tangibly do something about it, to be able to solve that problem, to be able to give them a resource. When you follow up a couple weeks later, hopefully their situation is improved.
Mm-hmm.
They're smiling again. They're back where you need to be, where you want them to be. For me, that's the best part. I like to fix things. I'm a fixer. Shit, I'm a mechanic, man.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I like fixing things. So to be able, not necessarily to fix people, but to fix their problems.
Code 1 Airman. Yeah.
It's to talk to people, to fix their problems. That's my shit, man. Like, that's what keeps me motivated. That's what keeps me rolling. Like, that's what I love to do. That's why I wanted this job, just because I want to help people. I want to be the resource that sometimes I never had in my career, whether it was a supervisor, first sergeant, or whatever.
Okay, so what do you hate?
What do I hate?
Yeah. Or maybe hate's not the right word. What's something you do not enjoy? We'll use that word.
I mean, I don't think I've been doing it long enough, honestly, to really have any deep-seated burning hatreds for things that I just loathe about this job.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody likes, the everyday administrator. Do I like chasing down GTC delinquencies? No, I freaking hate it. Like, why is that coming across my desk? Why? Like, it's 30 days overdue. Okay, why is that in my lane? Like, why am I here for that?
Okay, I agree with that. Why the fuck is it in your lane? Why doesn't it just go to the flight chiefs?
Because it's a readiness issue.
I feel like it's not a readiness issue, but I get what you're saying.
That's how it's classified, my friend. I'm not. We'll leave it at that.
I guess it's the petty things, right?
Like, why am I getting a star card late notice?
Yep, I got those and I threw them away when I was like, okay, well, he gets them too.
I dutifully scan it into the PIF and do what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, I'm not encouraging you to follow in my footsteps.
I know, because it's a quality force indicator. Like, people have finances, people forget shit, it happens. It's just that type of stuff. It's the stuff that rolls through that it should not be at my level yet. Why is it automatically escalated to my level? Give these supervisors and flight chiefs a chance
to
lead and supervise. Like, it doesn't automatically have to come to me.
Is it codified in AFI that has to be at your level, or can it just be delegated down and the flight chiefs have to deal with it? And I say that as somebody that was a flight chief and was task saturated, and maybe that's not the nicest thing to say, and there might be flight chiefs listening like, what the fuck is he doing pushing more shit down?
Who is this guy? I mean, I absolutely get it. Like, but then again, like it all comes back to me. It's systemic. We want to go with the route of least resistance in the first sergeant.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that's who we're going to go to. We don't give supervisors a chance to supervise. We don't give flight chiefs a chance to lead. Like you've got to give these folks room to grow and fail.
Yeah, I agree.
Failure can't be optional. It's got to be mandatory, man. Like
yep.
It's got to be. Like, you've got to give people that latitude.
Or even optional, because the mantra is failure is not an option. We can at least move to recognizing that failure is an option, and eventually move to recognizing that failure is an inevitability.
Right.
It's just, learning from it and mitigating the failure as best as you can. Okay. Right. Well, Branden, it was really great to have you on and have a talk. Thanks for giving up your Friday to talk to me, a stranger. So that was cool.
I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. Hopefully I don't piss off too many people.
No, I'm sure you didn't. No. No. Okay. Well, I appreciate it. And that's the show. Adios.